They say the oldest schools hide the darkest secrets. They say the stones of the walls remember every whisper, every tear, every betrayal. At Blackwood Academy, the stones don't just remember, they echo. My name is Leo, and I was supposed to be one of the lucky ones. A scholarship kid, plucked from obscurity and placed into the hallowed halls of Blackwood. A place where the children of senators and CEOs walked the same corridors as legacy families who had attended for generations. The school was a masterpiece of Gothic architecture. Towers or spires clawed at the gray sky. Gargoyles with mocking faces stared down from the rooftops. It was intimidating, ancient, and beautiful, and I was completely, utterly alone. Until I met Julian. Julian was everything I wasn't. Confident, wealthy, effortlessly charming. His family had practically built one of the school's wings. He was the sun, and everyone else orbited around him. His inner circle consisted of Marcus, the star athlete with a cruel streak, and Chloe, quiet and observant, whose beauty was only matched by the sadness in her eyes. For some reason, Julian took an interest in me. He invited me to his study group. He helped me with my classes. He introduced me as his protege, his discovery. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. The loneliness that had been a constant companion began to fade. I should have known it was a lie. The first hint of darkness came during a late-night study session in the library's restricted section. Julian pulled out a leather-bound book with no title. The pages were yellowed and brittle. "Every great institution has its traditions, Leo," he said, his voice a low whisper. "Blackwood is no different. This is how we ensure success, how we stay on top." He pointed to a strange circular symbol drawn on one of the pages. It looked like a serpent eating its own tail, but with thorns and jagged lines inside the circle. Marcus laughed. "Don't scare him, Julian. He's not ready." Chloe just stared at the book, her face pale. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I felt a knot of unease in my stomach, but I pushed it away. This was my initiation, my final test to be truly one of them. I wanted it so badly. I nodded, trying to look brave. "I'm ready," I said. It was the biggest mistake of my life. A week later, the invitation came. A late-night meeting. At the old observatory, at the top of the highest spire, a place that had been officially closed for decades. "It's the Spire's vow," Julian explained, his eyes glittering with excitement. "A tradition passed down through generations. It binds us, guarantees our future. Once you do this, you're one of us, forever." The words sounded so promising. That night, the air was cold and still. The moon was a sliver in the sky. I climbed the winding stone staircase of the spire, my footsteps echoing in the silence. At the top, the observatory was a dome of glass and rusted metal. In the center of the room, Julian, Marcus, and Chloe stood around a circle drawn on the dusty floor with white chalk. It was the same symbol from the book. Candles flickered at its edges, casting long dancing shadows. "Leo, you came," Julian said, smiling. It was a predator's smile. "What do I have to do?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Marcus pushed a small, silver knife into my hand. "We each give a little, a drop of blood, to seal the pact." One by one, they pricked their fingers and let a single drop of blood fall onto the chalk line. It sizzled, turning the white line a rusty brown. My turn came. With a deep breath, I did the same. The pain was sharp, but the feeling of inclusion was sharper. I had done it. I was in. But the ritual wasn't over. Julian opened the old book and began to chant. The words were in a language I didn't recognize, ancient, guttural sounds that made the air grow heavy and cold. The candle flames danced wildly, casting our shadows on the high domed ceiling. They looked like giants, distorted monsters. Then, the chant changed. I started to recognize words. My words. They were chanting about my hopes, My fears, my scholarship, my desire to fit in. My mother working 2 jobs to support me. Everything I had ever told Julian in confidence. And then, they chanted my name, over and over. Leo, Leo, Leo. It wasn't a chant of inclusion. It was an incantation, an offering. A profound, bone-deep cold seeped into me. A terror unlike anything I had ever known. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, to coalesce in the center of the circle. The air crackled. A whisper slithered through the room, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a voice made of static and sorrow. "Leave it," hissed as I was left. I stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What is this? What have you done?" Marcus just laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "Every year, the Spire needs an anchor, you idiot. A vessel for all the bad luck, all the misfortune, so the rest of us can fly." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't welcomed me. They had chosen me as a sacrifice. "The echo of the Spire," Chloe whispered, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and fear. "It's the ghost of a student from long ago, betrayed just like..." She couldn't finish. Julian closed the book with a loud thud. The presence in the room seemed to surge, focusing entirely on me. "Congratulations, Leo. Your sacrifice will ensure our success. Don't worry. It only wants one person at a time, and now, it has you." They blew out the candles, plunging the room into near-total darkness. I heard their footsteps retreating down the stone stairs, their laughter echoing back up to me. They had left me there, alone. With it, the first few days were subtle, a cold spot in my dorm room that never went away. The feeling of being watched when no one was there. My reflection in a window seeming to move a second after I did. Then came the whispers. They would start when I was on the edge of sleep. My own voice twisted with despair listing my failures. "You're not good enough. They all know you're a fraud. You will fail." I stopped sleeping. Dark circles formed under my eyes. My grades, once my pride, began to plummet. I would be reading a textbook, and the words would rearrange themselves into taunts. Alone. Forgotten. Betrayed. Meanwhile, Julian, Marcus, and Chloe were thriving. Marcus scored the winning touchdown in a game everyone thought they would lose. Julian aced an impossible physics exam. Chloe was offered a prestigious art scholarship. My bad luck was fueling their good fortune. They had tethered the curse to me and were reaping all the rewards. When I tried to confront them in the hallway, they looked right through me, as if I were a ghost already. My classmates started to avoid me. I was the weird, paranoid kid who muttered to himself. The story they spread was that the pressure had gotten to me, that I was breaking down. They were right. I was breaking, but not for the reason they thought. The echo was getting stronger. One night, I saw it for the first time, not as a shadow, but as a shape. I was washing my face in the bathroom, staring into the mirror. For a split second, my reflection wasn't my own. It was a boy, pale and thin, with eyes wide with terror and a mouth open in a silent scream. Water dripped from his hair, though my own hair was dry. On the collar of his old-fashioned Blackwood uniform, I could just make out an embroidered name. Elias. That name, Elias. It was a lifeline, a clue. I stopped trying to talk to the living. They had abandoned me. I decided to learn about the dead. I spent every waking moment I could in the library's archives. I pored over old yearbooks, school newspapers, and town records from the 1920s. The librarian, a stern old woman named Mrs. Gable, watched me with suspicion. "Looking for ghosts, Mr. Evans?" she asked one afternoon, her voice dry as old paper. "Looking for the truth," I replied. Finally, I found him. Elias Vance, a scholarship student just like me. a member of a prestigious student club called the Aethelred Society. Pictured next to him in the club photo were the grandfathers of Julian and Marcus. They wore the same predatory smiles. The school newspaper from the spring of 1927 had a small, sterile article, "Student Disappears." Elias Vance, a promising young scholar, is believed to have run away from Blackwood Academy. His belongings were found, but the boy has vanished. Vanished. He didn't run away. I knew it. He was betrayed. He was the sacrifice of his generation, and he never left. He became the Echo, a spectral prisoner of the Spire, his pain weaponized by the privileged few. The Echo wasn't trying to hurt me. The cold, the whispers, the fear, it was all it knew. It was a warning. It was its own story, screamed into the void, and I was the only one who could hear it. My fear began to change. It sharpened into anger, and then into a plan. They bound a ghost to me using a ritual. They used my name, my hopes, my blood. They created a sympathetic link. What if I could use that link not to suffer, but to communicate? What if I could break the cycle? I found what I was looking for in another forbidden book, a book on spiritual tethers and hauntings. It spoke of echoous spirits bound to a place and a purpose by trauma and dark rituals. It said that such an echo could not be destroyed, but it could, potentially, be redirected. The ritual had bound the echo to a vessel. It didn't specify that the vessel had to be willing, or that there could only be one. The curse was designed to feed on one person's despair. But what if the source of the despair was laid bare? What if the ghost was shown who was truly responsible for the continuation of its pain? The annual Blackwood Benefactors Gala was in 2 days, the biggest event of the year. Julian, as the heir to a major donor family, was scheduled to give a speech in the Grand Hall. It was the perfect stage. The night of the gala, the Grand Hall was filled with the rich and powerful. Crystal chandeliers glittered, champagne flowed. Men and women in expensive clothes laughed, oblivious to the rot at the school's core. I didn't bother with a tuxedo. I wore my simple, everyday clothes. I was a ghost at their feast. Julian took the stage, bathed in a spotlight. He looked perfect, confident. He started his speech, talking about tradition, legacy, and the bright future of Blackwood Academy. The hypocrisy was nauseating. While he spoke, I made my way to the side of the stage, near the heavy velvet curtains. I closed my eyes. I didn't try to block out the cold or the whispers anymore. I invited them in. "Elias," I whispered, my voice quiet but clear. "Elias Vance, I know your name. I know what they did to you. The grandsons of the boys who betrayed you are here. Julian, Marcus. They are continuing the cycle. They are using your pain." The air around me dropped 20 degrees. The whispers in my head grew frantic, desperate. "Show them," I urged. "Don't show me, show them." On stage, Julian faltered. He squinted at the teleprompter. The future of Blackwood is. I opened my eyes and looked at the teleprompter screen. The words of his speech were gone, replaced by one word, written over and over. Betrayed. 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 Julian paled. He started to sweat under the hot lights. He looked out at the audience, and his confident smile froze. Because standing in the aisle, where I'd been just moments before, was the faint, shimmering outline of a boy in an old-fashioned uniform. Pale, terrified, dripping with spectral water. Elias. No one else could see him clearly, but they felt him. A wave of unnatural cold washed over the hall. Laughter died in people's throats. The crystal chandeliers flickered violently. "What's happening?" someone in the crowd murmured. Julian's eyes were locked on the ghost. He couldn't look away. I walked towards the stage, my steps steady. The The sympathetic link was shifting. The echo was no longer focused on me. It was focused on the source of its legacy of pain. "He knows you, Julian," I said, my voice now carrying through the silent hall. "He knows what you did in the Spire." Marcus, standing near the front row, looked from Julian to me, his face a mask of panic. Chloe was clutching her hands together, tears streaming down her face. On the stage, Julian began to babble. "It's a trick, a projection. He's crazy." But the whispers started, not just in my head anymore. They filled the hall, 1,000 overlapping voices of sorrow and anger, all coming from the stage, from Julian himself. The microphone picked them up and amplified them throughout the grand hall. "Liar, betrayer, you left him, you left me." The ghost of Elias Vance drifted forward, right through the tables and the stunned guests, until it was standing directly in front of the stage, pointing a translucent, trembling finger at Julian. Julian screamed, a raw, terrified sound that cut through the whispers. He stumbled backward, tripping over the podium and crashed to the floor. He scrambled away on his hands and knees, his eyes wide with a madness that I knew all too well. He was seeing what I had seen for weeks, but for him, there would be no escape. The echo now knew its true tormentors. Chaos erupted. People were shouting, running for the exits. In the midst of it all, I saw Marcus clutching his head, screaming that the whispers wouldn't stop. I saw Chloe sobbing, finally broken by the guilt. The curse hadn't been broken. It had just been returned to its rightful owners. Their luck was over. Their debt had come due. The ghostly form of Elias turned to look at me. For a moment, the terror in its eyes was replaced with something else, a flicker of gratitude. The cold around me finally, blessedly, receded. The link was broken. A faint, final whisper touched my mind, not filled with pain, but with peace. "Thank you." And then, he was gone. I didn't stay to watch the aftermath. I walked out of the grand hall, out of the main doors of Blackwood Academy, and I didn't look back. The official story was that Julian and Marcus had a shared, stress-induced psychotic break. Chloe, overwhelmed, transferred to a different school immediately. Their powerful families swept the scandal under the rug as best they could. But the whispers around Blackwood had changed. They were no longer about my supposed breakdown. They were about the curse of the Spire, the night of the gala, and the terrible echoing screams of Julian Thorne. I left Blackwood and never returned. I didn't get the future I thought I wanted, surrounded by wealth and prestige. I got something better. I got my life back. Sometimes, on cold, quiet nights, I think about the stones of Blackwood Academy. They say the oldest schools hide the darkest secrets, but I know the truth. The secrets don't stay hidden forever. Eventually they echo, and sometimes, if you listen closely, you can hear them demanding justice.